What if I told you, the world map you have trusted your whole life has been quietly lying to you? Some countries look absolutely massive on maps. So massive that they seem bigger than continents, bigger than empires, bigger than anything else on Earth. But in real life, many of them are far smaller than they appear. And once you see the truth, you will never look at a map the same way again. Because today, we are uncovering countries that look huge on maps, but are actually much smaller than you think. And the reason behind it is so strange, it changes the way you see the entire planet. Let's begin. Most of us grow up staring at the same kind of world map. It hangs in classrooms, appears in books, shows up in videos, and sits in the back of our minds as the correct image of Earth. But there is one big problem. Earth is round. Maps are flat. And when you try to flatten a round planet onto a flat surface, something has to get stretched, bent, or distorted. That is where the illusion begins. The most famous world map style, the Mercator projection, was useful for navigation. It helped sailors travel in straight directions. But it came with a hidden cost. It made places near the poles look much larger than they really are. So countries in the far north and south often appear giant on maps, even when their true size is much smaller than your eyes have been telling you. And one of the biggest examples of this is Greenland. On a typical world map, Greenland looks enormous. It seems almost as large as Africa. Sometimes it even feels like it could swallow half the planet. But that is pure illusion. Africa is not slightly bigger than Greenland. Africa is massively bigger. Greenland is about 2.1 million square kilometers. Africa is over 30 million square kilometers. That means Africa is around 14 times larger. Think about that. A place that looks close in size on many maps is actually nowhere near close in real life. Greenland is still huge, of course. It is the world's largest island. But the map exaggerates it so much that many people imagine it as a supercontinent-sized landmass, when it is not even remotely comparable to Africa. And Greenland is just the beginning. Next, look at Canada. Canada often appears gigantic on the map, stretching across the top of North America like an endless frozen wall. And yes, Canada is a very large country. It is the second largest country on Earth by total area. But here is where the illusion becomes interesting. Because so much of Canada lies far north, the map makes its land look even more overwhelming than it really is. In visual terms, it can seem almost unbelievably large compared to countries lower down on the map. But when you compare it properly, Canada is not some unstoppable giant that dwarfs everything else on Earth. In fact, Africa alone is about 3 times bigger than Canada. So even though Canada looks like one of the most dominant shapes on the map, its apparent size is still inflated by the way the world is drawn. Then there is Russia. Russia really is enormous. There is no trick there. It is the largest country in the world. But even Russia gets stretched by maps because so much of it sits in the far north. On many maps, Russia looks almost impossible in size, like it takes over half the planet. It feels so large that you could almost imagine it being equal to all of Africa. But again, reality says otherwise. Africa is still much larger than Russia. Russia is about 17 million square kilometers. Africa is over 30 million. So even the biggest country on Earth is only a little more than half the size of Africa. That is how powerful map distortion really is. It can take a country that is already huge and make it feel almost unreal. Now let's talk about another country that surprises people, Iceland. On some maps, Iceland looks like a major landmass floating in the North Atlantic. Because it sits so far north, it gets visually enlarged like Greenland and northern Canada. But Iceland is actually much smaller than many people imagine. It covers about 103,000 square kilometers. That is big enough to matter, but nowhere near the giant island it can appear to be on some world maps. Its dramatic placement and northern location make it feel larger than its true size. And the same kind of illusion happens with Scandinavian countries too. Take Norway and Sweden. They often look long, broad, and dominant on the map, especially because of how high they sit on the globe. Their shapes stretch upward into the north, and the projection makes them seem even larger. But when compared to countries closer to the equator, they are often much smaller than viewers expect. This is where the map really plays tricks on your brain. Because we do not just judge size by numbers. We judge it by sight. And sight can be fooled. That is why countries closer to the equator are often the opposite story. They can look smaller on maps than they really are. For example, countries in Africa and South America are often visually compressed compared to northern countries. So while Greenland looks like a monster on the map, countries like the Democratic Republic of the Congo or Algeria can appear far less dominant than they truly are. And that creates a very strange effect. Some countries become famous for looking huge. Others stay underestimated, even when they are actually far larger. This is not just a geography mistake. It changes how people imagine the world. It changes what feels powerful. What feels important. What feels central. And what feels massive. A distorted map does not just change shapes. It changes perception. That is what makes this topic so fascinating. The world most of us picture in our heads is not the world as it truly looks. It is the world filtered through a design choice made centuries ago. And once you realize that, you start noticing it everywhere. Greenland is not rivaling Africa. Canada is not dominating the globe as much as it seems. Russia, even as the largest country on Earth, is still far smaller than Africa. And many northern countries have been visually enlarged in our minds for years. So the next time you look at a world map, ask yourself a simple question. Am I seeing the Earth? Or just a very clever illusion? Because sometimes the biggest things on the map are not the biggest things in reality. And that is one of the strangest geography facts of all. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment which country shocked you the most. And after this, you may never trust a world map the same way again.